Well, let's turn to the day's business news now with Stephen Carroll joining us once again. We're going to start in Greece, Stephen. Banks have been given a little extra breathing room. Tell us more.
And that's come from the European Central Bank. They've again raised the ceiling on the emergency funding that they give to Greek banks, according to Bloomberg. The €900 million increase in what's called liquidity assistance came before that overnight vote on the latest package of economic reforms. It's the second time in a week that the ECB has stepped in to help Greek banks from running out of money. It was the decision by the ECB to cap this emergency assistance to Greek banks that forced capital controls to be put in place nearly 4 weeks ago now. The banks, of course, have reopened, but the limits on cash withdrawals and foreign banks transfers have remained in place.
Take us through what's happening in the markets now, Stephen, if you will.
Well, we'll start here in Europe, where trading's just begun, and it's a positive start on the European markets. A bit of a boost from that news from Greece, the vote in the Greek Parliament overnight. Technology shares too bouncing back somewhat after the falls we saw across the sector yesterday. Credit Suisse in Zurich is up by almost 5%. This after their results came in better than had been expected. Over in Asia, shares in Asia too getting a little bit of a boost from Greece. The main markets all trading up. You can see the Shanghai Composite there up 2.5%. The Kospi and Seoul still managing to eke out some minor gains. That's despite some poor economic growth figures coming from South Korea, showing the slowest growth there in 6 years.
Well, moving on now, Stephen. The website AirBnB, they're facing trouble in another European city.
Yeah, Barcelona has become the latest city to crack down on unlicensed rentals. Authorities there have imposed new taxes and regulations on Airbnb users, including a rule that owners must be present on the property throughout a stay. Airbnb and other companies based on the sharing economy model are facing growing opposition in many cities around the world. Kate Moody has more.
A trip to Barcelona's sunny beaches is getting more expensive and less convenient. With 27 million visitors a year, the city offers more rooms through sites like Airbnb than in traditional hotels, and authorities are now laying down the law. Tourists staying in private residences will be subject to a 65-cent per night tax. Rentals will be limited to 2 rooms per property for at most 4 months per year, and owners will have to register the transactions and be present for the duration of their guests' stay. That means this regular Airbnb host will have to stop renting out his studio apartment for €100 per night when he goes away.
The money helped me pay for vacations and little luxuries. I didn't do it often, maybe 3 or 4 times a year for some extra cash.
The local government expects the new measures to bring in between 10 and 15 million euros over the next 3 years. Last year, Barcelona fined Airbnb €30,000 for illegal rentals, and authorities say it's time for the service to be regulated like the rest of the tourist industry, which accounts for about 14% of the city's economy.
When there's no legal framework, that's called an underground economy. That means lack of security for consumers. It's a bad thing for tourism in our region.
It's not just Catalonia that's turning up the heat. Paris, Berlin and Amsterdam are also trying to crack down on informal tourist rentals, while EU officials are considering measures to regulate the sharing economy across Europe.
Let's take a look next at some of the day's other business headlines. And authorities in New York have struck a last-minute deal with the car-hailing service Uber to avoid imposing limits on the number of cars in the city. New York wanted to cap growth in the number of cars that Uber has operating in the city while it carries out a study on the impact of its services on traffic and on the environment. But Uber avoided the measure by agreeing to hand over more data about its operations. New York State, meanwhile, is to raise the minimum wage for fast food workers to $15 an hour. That's a 71% increase on the current basic wage of $8.75. The increase will be implemented from 2018 in New York City and from 2021 elsewhere in the state. And it's been a record 3 months for German car brand Daimler. Revenue was up by almost 1/5 to €37.5 billion. Mercedes-Benz, owned by Daimler, saw its sales rise too by 20% and continued to grow in a slowing Chinese market.
We're going to finish off, Stephen, with this final story. Business world full of missed opportunities. One particularly painful example.
Yeah, I mean, I say we all. Many people do remember the videos rental chain Blockbuster. We remember. So some of us of a certain age remember it. That closed down permanently last year. But it's emerged that back in 2000, the then chief executive of the company, John Antioco, passed up the chance to buy Netflix. Now, according to Variety, Netflix boss Reed Hastings teams had approached Blockbuster about a takeover for $50 million. But Antioco passed on the deal, thinking that Netflix, which was then just a mail-order service, was a small niche business. That small niche business now worth nearly $33 billion with 50 million subscribers worldwide.
Yikes.
Exactly. Awkward turtle.
He'll be kicking himself over that one. Thanks very much, though, Stephen. With the business news.